Chips over time robustly diversify the gameplay. By integrating such game mechanics, you can turn the project from an ordinary representative of the genre into a distinctive and interesting game. In this video, we have collected the most famous games that deserve the attention of gamers precisely due to the gameplay mechanics over time. Max Payne, the most famous game with bullet time, which perhaps popularized the ability to slow down time in shooters right during gunfights. By slowing down time, all enemies and bullets in Max Payne are perceptibly frozen, which allows you to track the direction of flying bullets. The player character also slows down, but the player does not lose control over him, continuing to fire and dodge enemy shots. Bullet time looks especially spectacular in a jump. After the death of all enemies, the camera gives an overview of the battlefield, showing spectacularly falling already insensible and inanimate bodies of opponents. Quantum Break, a fantastic third-person shooter whose heroes, and there are several of them here at once, have the ability to perform all sorts of time manipulations, including stop or greatly slowing down right during the battle. Adding to the tension of the battles in Quantum Break is the fact that many of the enemies are also trained in all sorts of temporary techniques, which makes them very dangerous and unpredictable. Also, the ability to briefly reverse the course of time is involved in solving some puzzles. In general, a very interesting and spectacular game from the Finnish studio Remedy Entertainment. Timeshift, a sci-fi first-person shooter where game mechanics over time were not just far-fetched for the sake of interesting situations, but were correctly integrated into the game's plot. The main advantage of the protagonist was his chronosuit, which gave him several unique abilities at once, ranging from slowing down and stopping time, and ending with inversion, used only at strictly defined stages of the game. Unfortunately, the project did not receive much recognition from gamers. We can say that the game was just unlucky. A good and well-developed project was simply lost in an avalanche of other first-person shooters when this genre was at its peak. Perhaps the game was not prevented by the highest development budgets. For 2007, the project looked frankly weak, especially against the backdrop of Crysis and Unreal Tournament 2007 released in the same year. But despite this, Timeshift remains one of the most interesting futuristic shooters that you can play with over time. Braid, creative game from an independent developer, which is a 2D platformer and puzzle, the levels of which must be completed using the ability to control time, which is endowed by the protagonist named Tim. The game is quite old, released in 2008. It was Braid, along with Max Payne, that became another very important game that showed how unique and exciting the gameplay can be, where the ability to influence the passage of time within the game is implemented. Stranglehold, spectacular action in the spirit of Max Payne, which is the continuation of films from the famous Hong Kong director John Woo. The hero of the shooter is a cool police detective Yen, who alone fights against the Russian mafia and other dangerous criminals who have unleashed a war with the Triad and kidnapped the protagonist's ex-wife. The game features high pace and interactivity, as well as the ability to slow down time in the same way as it was implemented in the games of the cult Max Payne series. Total Overdose, and another great action-packed third-person shooter, this time more of a GTA clone, but with a time-slow effect triggered during gunfights when the player uses evasive dodges and flips. In addition, the game has a rather big open world, the ability to use different types of transport, and a pretty good story on a criminal theme, which takes place in Mexico. Fallout 4. The combat system of role-playing games featured an original turn-based aiming system called VATS, which allowed you to take an aimed shot at a specific part of the enemy's body, such as the head, arm, or leg. In later games, such as Fallout 3 and Fallout 4, this system was retained, but was refined and adapted to the features of real-time action, working from the first and third person. To enable VATS in Fallout 4, AP is still required, but the game does not stop completely, but only slows down a lot, allowing the player to assess the situation and make an aimed shot at the selected part of the enemy's body with a high probability of inflicting critical damage and hanging an injury on the damaged organ. Superhot. The original first-person action game with elements of hand-to-hand combat found its army of fans precisely because of its game mechanics. Here, time only moves when the player moves. Imagine a situation where you are standing in a huge hall, and a dozen barrels are aimed at a character, on half of which they have already managed to pull the trigger. But only in Superhot, such a situation will not cause stress for the player. After all, when the main character stands still, time freezes with him. And here you can beat off bullets with your own katana. To further diversify the gameplay, the developers have added a system of bonuses or so-called perks. For example, the game has a perk that causes all items to explode after being hit by a bullet from the player. My Friend Pedro. An insane 2D shooter where you can also use Slo Mo and perform all sorts of complex acrobatic etudes right during the battle. And also use the features of the environment for a more spectacular and effective elimination of numerous opponents. And there is also a schizoid story here that tells about an unusual guy who makes friends with a banana, who incites him to all sorts of dangerous adventures. For example, armed attacks against ferocious gangster gangs. Prince of Persia. Created back in 1989 by Jordan Mechner, the game about the adventures of a young prince was a breakthrough in the action-adventure genre. New life was breathed into the project by the developers from Ubisoft, who bought the rights and created one of the most memorable adventures of 2003, Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. The game was a resounding success, and over the next 2 years, the developers released 2 more parts, called The Warrior Within and The Two Thrones. The prince possessed great dexterity, able to run along the walls, spin on the crossbars, and skillfully jump over the abyss. But in order to avoid risks, the hero could literally rewind time, which gave players a little more chance of a successful pirouette without having to pause the game and load the last save. Fear. A mystical first-person shooter, where the ability to use time dilation during combat is also very well implemented. This makes the battles more spectacular and tactically convenient. True, you can use Slo Mo only for a limited time, until the special scale ends. After that, you will have to wait for its replenishment, or you will replenish it yourself with special injectors, and continue your fun and experiments with time. It is noteworthy that such an opportunity in the game is explained by an increase in adrenaline, which is supposedly thrown into the hero's blood in the most dangerous situations. Singularity. Another mystical first-person shooter, the story and gameplay in which are based on all sorts of time paradoxes, and the ability of the protagonist to influence his course with the help of a complex scientific gadget called MVP. This thing allows the player to literally travel in time and influence the surrounding objects, aging or rejuvenating them. And of course, with the help of a mobile time converter, namely, this is how the abbreviation MVP is deciphered. You can slow down opponents by creating a special sphere around you, inside which time is frozen. Sniper Elite. A sniper shooter and stealth action game where you will often have to sniper fire from different rifles with a telescopic sight. At the same time, in the case of a particularly successful shot, the X-ray mode is automatically turned on, demonstrating the flight of a bullet in slow motion and the moment it hits the enemy with X-ray transmission of the body, so that the player can see how the internal organs of the enemy turn into porridge, and the bones are crushed under furious force miniaturely meteorite. The same effect, in an even more refined form, is present in subsequent games in the Sniper Elite series. If your favorite game is not included in this list, write in the comments. Thank you for watching. Please read the description for more details. If you enjoyed the video, please support the channel with a super thanks, thumb up, subscribe, and turn on notifications to watch more.